I'm Teresa Caraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I'm continuing the story of Pedo Sadist and a Call for Help, where I talk about a 16-year-old girl where she and her brother were kidnapped from the mother at a time that the mother had escaped from 12 years of extreme violence. And then the father ended up committing fraud and representing the mother as having signed papers giving up custody when she didn't even know where they were, and ended up having full custody given to him by a corrupt court. So at this point, the daughter is now 10 and a half years later, 16, and in a place where she is in great danger and is being abused, and where there is the potential and some very strong hints that something may be happening to her at some time in the near future. So I'm following up and looking at where do we go, and the place that keeps coming up is the FBI. So I want to show why that is actually not working and ask, what is the FBI good for? Let's look at this. My approach is going to be looking at a socio-spiritual solution. So first I'm going to look at the sociological problem and how that's been imposed. Then I want to look at this from a spiritual perspective and from A Course in Miracles, and what is it that this means in the larger sense. And last, I want to look at it in terms of my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, and how we could fix this sort of thing, make sure it never happens again in a network of small-scale sovereignty. So let's look at it first from the sociological perspective. As I've said before, I believe the purpose of society in any culture, in any species, is to raise the next generation with security and the ability to take responsibility. So if we look at the institutions that have failed this mom, where do we start? We can start with the police, because during the 12 years that she was being violently abused, the police would have been notified when she came up with broken bones, when she had a split kidney, when she definitely had her skull caved in. These are all things that would have been reported in some context because they required attention from doctors and hospitals. That completely failed her. I think she's also collateral damage from the Iraq War, because that abusive husband is a veteran. And every time that something would happen, his friends would say, "Oh, go easy on him. He's traumatized from the war." And so that's another area where our society is failing. CPS has failed the mom, only interviewing the daughter in front of the dad and the stepmom, despite having documentation of what's going on. But at the same time, an anonymous welfare check was called in on the mom and her daughter from a different dad. So CPS shows up at her house and, of course, doesn't find anything. But if they had, I'm sure they would have taken the daughter and asked questions later. Meanwhile, things are escalating. There was a conversation between the stepmom and the dad that the daughter overheard, where they said that they felt like the mom was giving up and there were no longer any eyes on them, and that they could run their household the way that they wanted to. They also were going on a camping trip, and the daughter was supposed to reschedule for her work for another day, and there was some kind of mix-up where it didn't happen that way. And the dad looked at her and said with a snarl in his voice, as it was described, "There were several times I could have killed your mother, and I didn't. But if you disobey me, I won't hesitate." The daughter has sent to the mom letters that she would like to give to the dad and the stepmom when this is over and she's in a safe place. And those are letters that chronicle things that have happened and that say, I will forgive, but I will never forget. And you thought that I was asleep the time that you almost killed my brother? How could you think that I would have been asleep? So these are things that are ongoing, and we need a system to deal with things like this. There was an odd synchronicity for those of us who are looking at those kinds of things, where the mom told me that the daughter's boyfriend's mom had said, I read in a book somewhere that you can get your majority and attain your emancipation if a 16-year-old girl gets married. And she said, my son and I would both be happy to facilitate this, and we'd be happy to facilitate a divorce in 2 years when she comes of age, if that's what she wants. But we would do anything to keep her safe. And I said, well, that's really strange. I just read about that situation in a book that I was reading that I was going to give you. And this is The Bookwoman's Daughter. And in it, it goes through a period of time when there are people in Appalachia who have blue skin, blue tinted skin, and they are forbidden from marrying. And so the parents are in jail, and the daughter has someone who's willing to marry her, and she's 16, but instead she's able to show that she can stand on her own 2 feet and doesn't need that. So that, again, was something that I don't know would work because, at least in the book, it required the dad's permission. But it was just an odd sort of thing that tells me this is all going to work out. So when I went through the FBI form, on about every other screen, it was warning me about the terrible things that could happen to me if I'm giving them false information. But in order to give them any information, you have to keep clicking boxes and figuring out what each category is. And then it finally gets to kidnapping. Do you know the identity of the kidnapper? Yes or no? And that was enough for me to say, okay, there's not really a right answer here that fits the situation. Can I just talk to somebody? But of course, no. So the mom then went through that process and did it over the phone, where she got to a point where she could leave a voicemail about a kidnapping. And they said that they would get back to her in 24 to 48 hours, which was more than 2 days ago. Then I went to the FBI's page on international parental kidnapping to see who these villains were, and there were 14 of them. One was a 33-year-old Pakistani mom who took her 3-year-old son back to Pakistan. Another was a Belgian mom and the grandmother who conspired to take the daughter to Abu Dhabi, where she was also from. And then there was a 44-year-old Japanese mom who took her 6-year-old son back to Japan. There was a 24-year-old mom who took a newborn son back to Argentina, but she's a chef, and she's known to enjoy fine cuisine and may behave erratically. So, and she has tattoos, so that should just tell you what kind of person she is. Then there is a South Carolina mom who abducted her 11-year-old daughter after full custody was given to the dad. That one didn't seem to involve anything international. Then there was a Brazilian mom who took her son, and the co-conspirators have been indicted. So I don't know how many years they're spending in prison for helping a Brazilian mom take her child back to Brazil. And then there was a Filipino mom of 3 who had never married the dad, but at one point she wanted to take them to New Zealand for a couple of weeks, and the judge said, no, you have to give me all the passports because that would violate the custody orders. And then she never turned in the passports and presumably took the kids to the Philippines, where they are all now adults. There are 6 involving dads. 4 are Middle Eastern and 1 is Latino. Of the Middle Eastern, there are 2 Egyptian dads who took their kids back to Egypt. There is a Lebanese dad where the kids were gotten back after 1 month. And then there is an imam from Oman, who is also a television personality, who refused to let the kids go from there when the mother wanted to go back. The one person from 1986 who has a $25,000 reward out there is a New Hampshire dad who is armed and dangerous, but who took the 2 sons who at this point have to be somewhere in their 30s, since the dad would be 68. None of those seem as critical as the situation here that I'm talking about, that the mom is trying to bring attention to. When I hear about all of those moms who have become international terrorists who are wanted by Interpol for loving their children and wanting to make sure that they're safe and taken care of by a family and community, I think that we haven't gone that far from biblical times when concubines could be torn limb from limb for running back to their fathers. I think that in this case, those children are hostages, that it's a power play going on, especially when you have things like a newborn baby, and that baby can be taken from the mom, who at that point is all that that baby knows. These are not situations that are being done out of love. They're being done as power plays. What's the spiritual message here? I entertain the possibility from A Course in Miracles that this world is a reflection, that it's something that has something to teach us, but that it's not reality, that it's a dream that we need to interpret because the key to us waking up is in this dream. And so I think this is a situation that's showing us that all of those institutions of authority are failing us. They're things we just don't need anymore. They don't serve any useful function. I think that this situation is going to resolve in a way that is legal and that's just. And I think that it's going to happen in a way that will give us no doubt that we are not in charge here, and that we can trust that all of these things are working for our ultimate benefit. I think in a microcosm, it's going to show us the direction that we can go and that we can trust it. And when the daughter says that she will forgive but not forget, an important thing about forgiveness is that the first thing you need to do is take away someone's ability to do more harm. They cannot forgive themselves if they're still in a position of doing harm. And so this needs to take that away, both in this situation and in the situation that we're dealing with socially, and the Great Reset, and looking at all the things being inflicted on us. We can't forgive until we've made sure that no more harm can be done. The power has been taken away. And when I look at my program of small-scale sovereignty, I'm unequivocal that I think the bond between a mother and a child is sacred, and that you can never sever that without inflicting trauma and damage on the child. If we're a society that cares about the welfare of children, it has to start by respecting the relationship of the mother. To follow up on this, if you haven't seen it, this is Pedo Sadist and a Call for Help. And then this is a playlist on Where Are the Women, so that we can replace patriarchal pyramids of authority with maternal networks of caring. Thank you.